You're early. I know. I couldn't sleep. A pause. The kind that lasts exactly 1 second too long. Neither could I. That was it. That was the whole thing. 4 lines. Maybe 15 seconds of my life. And yet I stood in the doorway of her office at 7 in the morning, backpack on one shoulder, heart doing something completely unreasonable inside my chest, thinking, this is how it starts, isn't it? This is exactly how it starts. I didn't know what it was yet. I told myself I didn't, but my body already knew. My body had known for weeks. Let me go back. Let me tell you how a girl from Ohio ends up standing in a professor's office before sunrise, having just sent the most terrifying email of her entire life, trying to remember how to breathe like a normal person. It started in September, the way most things that ruin you do, quietly, without warning, disguised as something ordinary. I came to Hartwell University as a junior transfer, 20 years old, double majoring in English literature and creative writing, carrying a scholarship and a suitcase and the particular kind of loneliness that comes from starting over somewhere new when everyone else already has their people. My advisor assigned me to Professor Camille Vasquez's advanced fiction workshop as a requirement for the creative writing major. I didn't choose it. I didn't even look up who was teaching it before I walked in. That first day, I was 3 minutes late. The room was already full, 12 students seated in a circle of chairs, notebooks open, the kind of silence that meant class had technically already started. I slid into the one empty seat, murmured an apology to nobody in particular, and looked up, and there she was. Professor Vasquez was standing at the whiteboard, marker in hand, finishing a sentence she'd already begun. She didn't stop when I walked in. She didn't look at me. She just kept writing, clean and unhurried, like my arrival was a weather event she'd already accounted for. I noticed the writing first. Her handwriting, the way each letter had intention behind it. Not decorative, just precise. Like she didn't write anything she didn't mean. Then she turned around. She was maybe 35. Dark hair pulled back. Not formally, just back. The kind of thing you do when you have somewhere to be and hair is not your priority. She wore a gray blazer over a white shirt, sleeves pushed up to her forearms. No jewelry except for a single silver ring on her right hand, thin and plain. She had reading glasses pushed up on her head that she never once used in class as far as I could tell. Her eyes moved around the circle and landed on me for exactly 1 second. "Welcome," she said. It wasn't sarcastic, it wasn't warm either, it was simply accurate. Then she turned back to the board. I told my roommate Danny about class that evening. I said the professor seemed smart. I said the syllabus was intense. I said there were some interesting people in the workshop. I did not say anything about the gray blazer or the handwriting or the 1 second look. Even then, I was already protecting myself from the truth. The workshop met twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday. 3 hours each session. Professor Vasquez, she asked us to call her that, not Dr. Vasquez, not Camille. Professor Vasquez, thank you. Ran the room like someone who had thought very carefully about what a workshop should do and had zero patience for anything that fell short of that. She didn't perform warmth. She didn't soften feedback with preambles. When something in a story wasn't working, she said so, but she also always said, why? And she always said it with a specificity that made you feel less like you'd failed and more like you'd been handed a tool you didn't know you needed. The first time she read a passage of mine aloud in class, which she did with everyone at random without warning, I felt it in my whole body. My own words, in her voice. Something about hearing them that way made them sound more real than they had when I wrote them. More serious, like they deserved to exist. After class that day, I stayed to ask a question about the assignment. She was erasing the whiteboard, her back to the door. I said her name and she turned, and she was already listening before I'd finished asking. That was the thing about her. When she listened, she was completely there. No divided attention, no glancing at her phone, no nodding before you'd finished your sentence. Just her eyes on you, taking in every word, and then a pause. Always a pause before she answered. It made every conversation feel like it mattered, which was a problem, which was, looking back now, the first sign of everything that was coming. By October, I had started arriving to class 5 minutes early. I told myself it was because I liked to get a specific seat, the one directly across from the whiteboard, where I could see her handwriting most clearly. I told myself it was strategic. It was a workshop, sight lines mattered. Danny, who is not fooled by anything, asked me one night why I always seemed happier on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I said, I like that class. She looked at me for a long moment and then went back to her laptop. She knew. She just let me figure it out on my own timeline. The first time we had a real conversation, %, outside of class, outside of office hours, a real conversation, it was by accident. Early November. I was at the campus coffee shop, sitting alone at a corner table with a draft. I was tearing apart for the 4th time, headphones in, not listening to anything, just wearing them as a social shield. I looked up and she was standing at the counter. She ordered black coffee. No fuss, no customization, just coffee. Then she turned while she waited and she saw me. She didn't wave. She didn't look away either. She just walked over. Mind if I sit for a minute? I'm waiting for someone, but they're apparently running late. I took my headphones out. I said, of course. She sat down across from me, wrapped both hands around her cup and nodded toward my messy draft. 3rd act? I laughed before I could stop myself. 4th? What's breaking down? I almost said, oh, it's fine, you don't have to. And then I didn't, because she was asking like she actually wanted to know, so I told her. The problem with my protagonist, the way the emotional logic of the ending wasn't tracking with what I'd set up in the first half, the choice I kept second-guessing about what my character should want. She listened. She asked 2 questions. And then she said something so simple and so exactly right that I sat there after she left. Her friend had arrived and they moved to another table, and I wrote it down word for word in the margin of my draft. The character keeps running toward the wrong thing because the right thing terrifies her. That's not a plot problem. That's your whole story. I read that note for a long time. I thought it was about the story. November became a different kind of month. I started noticing things I had no business noticing. The way she held a pen during workshop, loosely, like she was always ready to write something down but never anxious about it. The way she laughed, which didn't happen often, but when it did, it was real. A short, surprise sound like the joke had arrived faster than expected, and she'd been caught off guard. The way she said yes when she agreed with something in a student's story. Not enthusiastic, not performative, just a single, certain yes that made the whole room feel like they'd gotten something right. I noticed when she was tired. There were 2 Tuesdays in November where she came in with her coffee already half finished. Something she never did, and her eyes had that particular flatness of someone who'd been up too late thinking about something she couldn't put down. On those days she was just as sharp in workshop, just as present. But there was something quieter underneath it. I noticed all of this and told myself it was just observation. I was a writer. This was what writers did. They paid attention to people, which was true and also completely beside the point. The thing that started to make it impossible to ignore was office hours. I had been going to her office hours since October, but in November, I started going every week. I had legitimate reason. I was working on a long story for the end of semester portfolio, that there were genuine things to discuss. But I was also aware, in a way I kept refusing to examine, that I looked forward to those Thursday afternoons with a particular kind of anticipation that didn't feel entirely academic. Her office was on the 3rd floor of the English building, small and overfull with books arranged in a system only she understood. There was a window that faced the quad. In November, the light coming through it went gold in the late afternoon, and if I stayed long enough, the whole room would shift into this warm amber, and she would keep talking and I would keep listening, and for 45 minutes the world outside felt very far away. One Thursday in mid-November, we were going over a scene I'd rewritten 3 times. She had my draft in front of her, marked up in pencil. She always used pencil, and she was walking me through a problem with the pacing. At some point she paused and looked up from the page and said, "Where do you think it goes wrong?" I told her. She listened, and then she said, "That's exactly right. You already knew," the way she said it, like she wasn't surprised, like she'd been waiting for me to get there and was genuinely pleased that I had. I drove home that evening and sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building for 10 minutes before going inside. I was not thinking about my story. Danny was eating cereal at the kitchen counter when I came in. She looked at me with that look she had, patient, observant, waiting. "Good office hours?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Productive." She ate another spoonful of cereal. "Sophie." "Danny, You're doing the thing. I'm not doing anything. You're doing the thing where you come home from something and you look like you've been slightly levitated and you pretend it's about work. I put my bag down. I got a glass of water. I stood at the counter and looked at the wall. She's my professor, I said. I know. So it doesn't matter what I know that too. I didn't finish the sentence. Because saying it out loud made it real, and real meant I had to deal with it, and I wasn't ready. Danny put her bowl in the sink and said very gently, "You don't have to do anything about it, you can just know." I thought about that for a long time. You can just know. I tried that. I tried knowing without doing anything about it. I tried treating it like a fact about the world. She has brown eyes. The sky is grey in November. I have feelings for my professor, something you acknowledge and file away and carry quietly. It worked for about 2 weeks. Then December happened. The last workshop of the semester, she handed back our portfolios in person, one by one, with a brief individual comment as she did. When she got to mine, she held it a second longer than the others. She looked at me directly and said, "This is the best thing you've written this semester. Maybe the best thing I've read in this workshop in 2 years. You should know that." Then she moved on to the next student. I didn't breathe for a full 30 seconds. After class, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, not thinking, just sitting with something that felt too large for the available space in my chest. That evening, I opened my laptop and I did the thing I had told myself I would not do. The thing I knew, on some level, I was always going to do. I started writing the letter. I want to be precise about what the letter was and what it wasn't. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't the kind of thing where I said, "I'm in love with you and I can't stop thinking about you." Even though both of those things were, in varying degrees, true, it was an email. Long, probably too long, carefully written and rewritten over 3 evenings. It said that I'd been aware for a while of something I hadn't known how to name, that being in her class had changed the way I thought about writing, about stories, about the kind of person I wanted to be, that I didn't expect anything, that I understood the situation completely, that I just needed to say it once to one person so it existed somewhere outside of my own head. I said I would understand if she didn't respond. I said the semester was over so there was nothing professional at stake. I said I was sorry if this made anything uncomfortable. Then I sent it. At 11:47 on a Tuesday night in December, 2 days after the last workshop of the fall semester, I closed my laptop and did not open it again that night. I told Danny, not the whole letter, but what it was. She sat on the edge of my bed with her knees pulled up and listened. And when I finished, she said, "How do you feel?" "Terrified," I said. "And also, lighter?" Like I put something down. That's not a bad thing to feel. She might not respond. She might not. And if she does, she might just... I stopped. She might have to end our working relationship or say it's inappropriate or... She might. Danny, you asked how you feel, not what will happen. Those are different questions. I didn't sleep well. I checked my email at 6 in the morning. Nothing. I made coffee, checked again, nothing. I told myself to stop checking, opened a book, read the same page 4 times, and checked again. There was an email from her at 7:12. The subject line was blank. My hands were shaking when I opened it. It was short, shorter than I expected. It said, "I read your email this morning. I would rather talk in person than respond in writing. Would you be willing to come by my office at some point this week? I have time Thursday morning, early 7 a.m., if that works for you. CVO." I read it 6 times. Then I wrote back immediately, "Yes, I'll be there." The 2 days between that email and Thursday morning were the longest days I can remember. I couldn't concentrate. I went through entire conversations with Danny where I heard nothing. I sat in the library and stared at pages I didn't read. I made up, in my head, every possible version of what she was going to say. She was going to say she appreciated my honesty, but this wasn't appropriate. She was going to say she thought of me as a student, only a student, always a student, and she was concerned about my perception. She was going to say she needed to report it to the department. She was going to look at me with something in her face that I wouldn't be able to misread and wouldn't be able to forget. And she was going to say, "I know." I played that last version the least often because it was the one that felt most dangerous to want. Thursday morning, I was up at 5. I showered, made coffee, stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror for a while. I put on a sweater I liked, and then changed into a different one, and then changed back into the first one. I drove to campus in the dark, parked, sat in my car watching the sky lighten over the English building. At 6:55 I went in. The building was almost completely empty. My footsteps were too loud in the stairwell. 3rd floor. The hallway was dark except for the light under her office door. She was already there. I knocked, she said, "Come in." She was standing at her desk, not seated. Like she'd been pacing maybe, or just hadn't wanted to sit yet. She was wearing a dark coat she hadn't taken off, like she'd arrived not long before me. There was coffee on her desk, steaming. She looked at me, and then she said, "You're early," and I said, "I know, I couldn't sleep." A pause. "Neither could I," she said. That pause. I felt it everywhere. She gestured toward the chair across from her desk. I sat. She didn't. She leaned against the edge of the desk instead, arms loosely crossed, and looked at me for a moment before she spoke. "I want to be honest with you," she said, "because you were honest with me, and that deserves the same back." I nodded. My hands were folded in my lap. I was working very hard to look like a person who was handling this well. "I've been thinking about what you wrote since I read it," she said. "I've been thinking about it since—" She paused, and something shifted in her expression, a small, careful adjustment. "Since before you wrote it, honestly." The room got very still. "I want to be clear about what I'm not going to do," she said. "I'm not going to pretend I don't know what you meant. I'm not going to give you the speech about how you've misinterpreted things, or how professional relationships sometimes feel more significant than they are, because that would be condescending, and it wouldn't be true." I exhaled slowly. "But I'm also not going to—" She stopped, started again. "The situation has constraints that I take seriously. You're a student here. I may be teaching you again next semester. There are actual reasons why this has to be handled carefully, not just rules for the sake of rules." "I know," I said. "I said that in the email." "You did?" She looked at me steadily. "You were very measured. I was scared." "I know." And the way she said, "I know," soft, certain, landed somewhere in my chest and didn't leave. We sat in that space for a moment. "So what does careful look like?" I asked. Because I was, apparently, a person who asked questions like that at 7 a.m. in December. She looked at me for a long time. Not the teacher look, something else. Something that she seemed to be deciding whether to let me see. "It looks like waiting," she said. "The semester ends. Next semester." She paused. "If you're not in my class next semester, the professional relationship changes. The constraints change." She uncrossed her arms. "That's not a promise. That's just an honest description of how I'm thinking about this." I looked at her. She looked at me. "I'm registered for your spring workshop," I said. "I registered in October." Something moved across her face, not surprise exactly, more like she was accounting for new information. "Then we have a problem," she said quietly. "Yeah," I said. We sat with that for a moment. "You could drop it," she said. "I could. Or you could stay enrolled and we continue exactly as we have been and don't—" She gestured between us. "Revisit this until the situation is different. Is that what you want?" The question surprised her. I could tell by the way she went still. "What I want," she said slowly, "is not the most relevant factor here." "I disagree," I said. "I think it's extremely relevant." She looked at me for a long moment and then, unbarely, she smiled. Just the edge of it, the corner of her mouth. She looked away toward the window where the morning was coming in gray and pale. When she looked back, the smile was gone, but something had stayed in her face. An openness. A kind of honesty she didn't usually wear where students could see it. "What I want," she said carefully, "is for you to be okay, and for the work you're doing to not get tangled up in this. You're a real writer, Sophie. I mean that in a specific way that I don't say often. My name." She said my name. She almost never used first names. "And beyond that," I said. A pause, long enough to mean something. "Ask me that question again in a different semester," she said, "and I'll give you an honest answer. But before we go further, if you've made it this far, it's because something in this story is touching something real in you. That feeling of caring about someone you're not supposed to, of being seen by exactly the wrong person at exactly the wrong time, click the like button right now. It takes 1 second and it helps me keep bringing you stories like this one. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and turn on the bell. That way YouTube lets you know when a new story drops on the channel. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever said something brave to someone and immediately wished you could take it back and also didn't want to take it back at all? Write it for me. I read everything. And tell me what city you're watching from. I'll heart every single one. Okay, back to the story. I dropped the spring workshop. I sent the email to the registrar that afternoon before I could change my mind. Then I sat on my bed and looked at the wall for a while and thought, okay, this is what careful looks like. January passed. I was taking other classes, working on other things, seeing her occasionally on campus, at the library, in the hallway near the English department, once in the parking lot in the rain, where we both happened to be walking in opposite directions and stopped for 30 seconds. She asked how my writing was going. I said good. She said good. We went our separate ways. 30 seconds. That was all. And I thought about it for 3 days. February was worse. I had made peace, I thought, with the situation. I had constructed a careful internal architecture around the whole thing, a structure that let me acknowledge what I felt without letting it take over. I was fine. I was working. I was living my actual life. Then I ran into her at an off-campus reading event. A local author, small venue, the kind of thing maybe 40 people attended. I hadn't known she'd be there. I came with Danny and sat toward the back, and during the intermission I turned around and she was 2 rows behind me, already looking at me. We ended up outside at the same time getting air. Danny very graciously invented a reason to go back inside. We stood on the sidewalk in the February cold. Steam from the coffee cups from the concession table, our breath visible between us. I heard you drop the workshop, she said. You heard. The department coordinator mentioned it. She was trying to figure out if there was a scheduling conflict she needed to fix. A pause. There wasn't a scheduling conflict. No, I said. She nodded slowly. She was looking at the street, not at me. That was... She started. It was the right thing, I said. You didn't have to say anything. I know I didn't. She looked at me then. I wanted you to know I noticed. My hands were cold. I put them in my pockets. I'm not trying to make this harder, I said. I know that too. We were quiet for a moment. The reading was starting up again inside. We could hear the low murmur through the door. After this semester, she said very carefully, the situation is different. You said that in December. I know I did. She looked at me. I'm saying it again. I held her gaze, the cold air between us. The specific weight of something that couldn't happen yet but wasn't being called impossible either. Okay, I said. Okay, she said. We went back inside separately. I did not sleep that night, but it was not the anxious, spiraling kind of not sleeping. It was the other kind, the kind where you're awake because something in you is too awake to power down, because something has shifted, because you said a thing and she said a thing, and now there is a very small door, where before there was a wall. And you can see light under it, and you're not ready to open it yet. But you know it's there. March. I was doing research in the library on a Thursday afternoon when she sat down across from me. I looked up. She had a book. I had my laptop. Neither of us had planned this. Hi, she said. Hi. She opened her book. I went back to my screen. We sat there for an hour and a half and barely spoke, and it was one of the most comfortable things I had experienced in months. At some point, she pushed a piece of paper across the table, a note folded once. I opened it. Your story in the December portfolio. The third one. I've been thinking about the ending. I think you ended it one scene too early. The real ending is the conversation that happens after. I read it twice. Then I wrote underneath it and slid it back. I know. I was scared of that conversation. She read it, wrote back, slid it over. Most good endings are. I kept that piece of paper. It's in a book on my desk right now. April arrived with a particular cruelty, the semester ending in plain sight. Each remaining week a countdown. I was trying not to calculate. I was aware that the end of the semester meant a change in the situation. The professional structure between us would technically shift. She would no longer be teaching me. The rules, as she had framed them, would be different. And I was terrified, not of her, of myself, of wanting something enough to risk losing it, of asking for something real and discovering that what I'd been holding on to for 5 months was one-sided in ways I hadn't let myself consider. I saw her in the hallway near the department office in the second to last week of the semester. She was coming out as I was going in. We stopped. She looked tired. Good tired. End of semester tired. There was a stack of folders under her arm. 2 more weeks, she said. 2 more weeks, I said. She shifted the folders, looked at me with that specific kind of directness that I had spent months learning to hold without looking away from. After finals week, she said, I'm having coffee at Fielding's on Saturday morning, around 9. A pause. That's not a general announcement. My heart was going completely unreasonable things. I'll be there, I said. She nodded once, kept walking. I stood in the hallway for a moment, not moving. Then I went into the department office and had absolutely no memory of what I was there to do. Finals week came. I submitted my portfolio. I finished my papers. I sat in the last few classes of the semester and moved through the week like someone carrying something fragile and irreplaceable who very much does not want to drop it. Friday night, the last night of finals week, I couldn't sit still. I cleaned my whole apartment. I reread the piece of paper from the library 6 times. I called Danny, who was at home for the holiday weekend, and she talked me through it. Not the situation, just me. Just kept me company on the phone while I walked around my apartment not knowing what to do with myself. You're going to be fine, she said. What if she's changed her mind? What if she hasn't? Danny, Sophie, you already did the brave thing. You sent the email. You dropped the class. You showed up, and you've been honest, and you've waited. What's left is just showing up again. That's terrifying. Most good endings are, she said. She'd read the piece of paper. Of course she had. I laughed despite everything. It was the first time I'd laughed all week. Get some sleep, Danny said, and then go get coffee. I was at Fielding's at 8:53. I know the exact time because I checked my phone in the parking lot and told myself not to go in more than 5 minutes early because I did not want to look desperate. And then I went in immediately anyway because it was cold, and I had no real self-control where this woman was concerned. She was already there. Of course she was. She was always already there. She had probably been there since 8:30, sitting with her black coffee, reading something perfectly composed. She was at a table near the window, hands around her cup, and she looked up the moment I walked in. Not because she'd heard the door. She was already looking at the door. Waiting. That small thing. That small, enormous thing. I ordered coffee. I walked over. She said good morning. I sat down across from her. We were not in her office. There was no desk between us. There was no professional frame around the conversation, no title on one side and student ID number on the other. Just 2 people at a table near a window on a Saturday morning. The semester finally and completely behind us. I have something to say, I said, before anything else. She set her cup down, gave me her full attention. She always did that. It never stopped being something I had to prepare for. I know you were careful, I said. I know you thought about this more than you had to. And I want to say, even if this conversation goes somewhere I'm not expecting, that the way you handled everything was... I stopped. It made me feel like I was real, like what I'd said was real. You could have dismissed it or minimized it, and you didn't. So, I just wanted to say that first. She looked at me for a moment. You are real, she said. What you said was real. I nodded. My turn, she said. She wrapped both hands around her cup. Outside, the Saturday morning moved past the window, people walking, the slow traffic of a town not yet fully awake. I've been a professor for 9 years, she said. I have thought carefully, very carefully, about what it means to be in a position of authority and what it means to be responsible with the trust that comes with that. I've watched colleagues get that wrong in ways that damage people. I take it seriously. I know you do. I'm not finished, she said. Not harsh, just not finished. I waited. I take it seriously, she said again, which is why it matters to me that I'm saying this now, in this context, with nothing ambiguous about the situation. She looked at me directly. You're not my student anymore. You won't be my student next semester. What I felt in December when I read your email and what I've felt for a while before that is something I've been honest with myself about even when I couldn't be honest with you. She paused. I want to be honest with you now. My hands were very still in my lap. I think you're extraordinary, she said. It came out simply. No decoration, no hedging. Just the sentence. I think you're extraordinary, and I've been paying attention since the first day of workshop when you walked in 3 minutes late, and I recognized something in you that I haven't seen in a long time. I said nothing. I'm not asking for anything, she said. I'm not putting anything on you. I just think, after everything, you deserve the honest version, not the careful, managed version. The actual one. The morning light came through the window and landed between us, gold and quiet. I thought about the email I'd sent in December, the 3 nights of rewriting, the shaking hands. I thought about dropping the class, about February in the cold, about a piece of paper that said most good endings are, in her precise, intentional handwriting. I thought about 5 months of knowing something and not being able to do anything about it. And I thought about how I had done something about it. Not by pushing, not by demanding, but by being honest, and then by being patient, and then by being honest again. How every step of it had cost something and been worth it. How I had not known at any point that it would end here. At a table near a window, in the morning, with her looking at me like I was something she'd been careful with because she knew I was worth being careful with. I took a breath. I'm going to ask you that question again, I said. She knew which one. I watched her know. What do you want? I said. Beyond everything careful and managed and responsible, what do you actually want? She looked at me for a long moment. I want to find out what this is, she said, when there's nothing in the way. The coffee between us was warm. The window held the morning, and for the first time in 5 months, I felt the thing I'd been carrying stop being a weight and become something else, something lighter, something I didn't have to brace against. Okay, I said. And she smiled. Not the edge of one, not just the corner, the whole thing. And it changed her face completely. Okay, she said, that was all. That was everything. We sat there for another 2 hours. We talked about her work and mine, about the authors she loved and the ones I was still finding, about a paper she was finishing and the novel I had started in November and hadn't told anyone about yet. We talked the way 2 people talk when they've been circling each other for months and finally stopped. The cost came later. Not all at once, but it came. When I told my parents, my mother went quiet on the phone for a long moment before asking careful, measured questions that told me she was trying, genuinely trying, even though it wasn't what she'd expected. My father said less. We got through it. 2 girls in my friend group at school stopped including me the way they had before. Not dramatically, just gradually, the invitations became less frequent. The group chat quieter, I noticed. It hurt in the specific way that things hurt when they confirm a fear you'd already made peace with. One person in the English department, not a professor, an administrator, made a comment once that I was told about secondhand, something careful and plausibly deniable that was nonetheless clearly meant to suggest that my academic success had not been entirely earned. Camille, she let me use her first name now when we weren't on campus, heard about it. She handled it in a way that I was not involved in and that I suspect was not entirely comfortable for the person who had made the comment. She told me about it one evening at her kitchen table matter-of-factly. I watched her face while she talked. She was not angry anymore. She had already put it somewhere. Does it bother you? I asked. People assume things, she said. What I know about the work you've done is not subject to what other people assume. She looked at me over her coffee cup. Does it bother you? She asked. I thought about it honestly. It used to scare me more than it does now, I said. I think I spent a long time making decisions based on how they'd look from outside. And then I made one decision based on what was actually true, and it cost something, and it was still the right thing. She set her cup down. That's the whole story, she said, of anyone who ever chose the real thing over the comfortable thing. That's all it is. I thought about December, about the email, about shaking hands and a blank subject line and a response that said, I'd rather talk in person. I thought about all the things I had not said for months and the one thing I finally had. I thought about who I was before I walked into that workshop in September, quieter than I should have been, smaller in certain ways, still making myself easier to manage. And who I was now, the cost was real. Some things had been lost, but I was whole in a way I hadn't been before. I was making real decisions with my real life. I had said a terrifying true thing to someone who deserved to hear it, and she had held it carefully. And we had waited until we could be honest without it costing either of us something we couldn't afford. That wasn't a small thing. It turned out the whole thing. I thought the bravest moment of this story was sending that email at midnight in December, but looking back, it wasn't that. The bravest moment was every morning after, when I chose to keep going, to drop the class, to be patient, to show up again and say, I want to know what you actually want. Choosing the real thing over the easier thing is not a one-time event. It's a daily decision, and the first time you make it, something in you changes, something that doesn't unchange. If this story touched something in you, write "entera" in the comments. That way I know you made it all the way here with me. And if you want to stay for the next story, one that I think will hit just as hard, it's already on your screen. A big hug, and see you in the next one.